So as you could feel it already, we would make the session very, very interactive.
That's right.
Because this is not one of these conventional webinar, you sit down there and just seeing slides. There's no point in just PowerPoint.
Exactly.
No point in no PowerPoint.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do is we keep the session relatively interactive. We'll give you pop quiz. We'll ask you to type in your thoughts into the chat box, and we'll pull out our collective insight to think about how to become future ready.
And Howard, actually, the series is called Leading in Turbulent Times. And we started the series at IMD here already a while back and talking about leading in and through turbulent times. But today, I think in 2023, we still feel that this is still a turbulent time, isn't it?
I know, right? And so in a way, when we are at IMD working with executives, or the CEO, all the way to the factory workers are thinking about how can I make sure my part of the organization is future ready? How can I make sure my business and my organization can future proof in years to come? And so I teach management and innovation at IMD. I'm also the Lego chair professor. What that means is the Lego group, some people from Copenhagen, the beautiful company, they also sponsor part of our research endeavor. So in large part, some of the content we're going to share coming out from the Center for Future Readiness, sponsored by the Lego group. And so for Lego, right, they think about how do we make sure in good time, our business is growing faster than competitor.
Right.
In that time, we suffer less. I think this is one of the area the executive thinking about becoming future ready. Right. It's impossible to predict what is going on. My God, you're in China.
Right.
I'm so glad I'm here in Shenzhen with you this week. Exactly. In China. So much has gone on. Tell me a little bit about what's your observation in China from the lens of China's initiative.
Right. So I'm professor of innovation and strategy at IMD, and I'm very happy to have Howard here in the office here with me at the China Initiative for IMD here in Shenzhen in the south of China. And, if anything, there's one word that describes what is happening in China and with China, it is turbulence. It is ambiguity. And it is the need for clarity. Where do we go? What should we do? The executives that we work with, that we see every day, are always looking for what do we need to do to win in this market, in other markets, and in our future. So a very, very important topic, and we're going to dive deep. But Howard, I have a question.
Yeah.
So we use this word future-proofing and future ready. Can you tell me a little bit more about being future ready? And maybe we can start with an example.
Sure. We said, on over the broad theme of discussion is a future ready organization. In theory, at least, right? When time is good, they should win more than competitor. Every company wants to have a competitive edge. Now, when things turn south, you should suffer less. You think about these days, every organization is talking about potential looming of recession, but some companies suffer less than others. But let's pick an example of an area that we all kind of can relate. And I was thinking about the space of consumer fashion. Now, this is the time that time is good. This is the time when during the pandemic, everyone is buying a lot of sneakers, sportswear, and things like this. What you're seeing here is there are some companies during the time that favor their environment, i.e. people buying sneakers, people want home gym. And so everyone is buying another wear of clothes to run and so on. Some companies see exponential growth. Some company doing all right. Some company actually, they file bankruptcy. Remember during the height of the pandemic, you have the brand called J. Crew, made famous by Michelle Obama, file bankruptcy. You have companies such as, Brooke Brothers, file bankruptcy. Gap was struggling. Now, Gap, of course, they have yoga pants, but they did not win. On the other hand, you have companies such as Nike and Lululemon just took off chart. You see there during the pandemic, they win more than Zara and H&M. And as I was just describing earlier, then you have companies like J. Crew And even Gap, they have the whole line of merchandise around yoga wear and so on. They struggle. By the way, Under Armour is kind of okay, but not stellar. So the key question becomes, how come Nike can win more during time is favor on their side? But then there's also a second element that when time becomes bad, now we know that the recession is coming and the financial market is very shaky. We don't know what is next. As a result, share price since the early part of this year among all the athletic wear are declining. But there are companies that suffer less than others. Mark, you're going to laugh at that because CNBC called me up really early in the morning. I remember it was like 5 a.m. I got a text and they want me to comment. Now, when CNBC call you up, you just need to wake up and start talking. Now, the anchor actually said to me in 2023, early part. So what we're seeing is somehow since the retreat of pandemic, since the looming of recession, then, whether it's Adidas, Lululemon, and Nike, they all suffer. And yet, Nike and Lululemon suffer less. So here's the quick question. Let's open the chat box and see what is your thought around this. When time is good, Lululemon and Nike winning more. When time becomes tougher, economic uncertainty, maybe inflation is climbing, etc., then Nike and Lululemon suffer less. Somehow, whether time is good or bad, they seems to be the winner. That in my mind is future ready. When you're future ready, you are just resilient during whatever climate as well. So let's open your chat box and describe. So we have some of the comments. So let's wait for a few minutes or a few seconds for people to type in their thoughts around. And so, one of the comments saying here is Adidas made some mistakes. And of course, they position themselves pretty crazy by endorsing someone who they shouldn't, right? These days, social media is so ubiquitous and, one shouldn't respond or making comment inappropriately. And so, but then how do we explain throughout different times, right? And one company that, did not win as much is Under Armour. The whole theme is around athletic wear. So let's put it on your chat box and think about what is your thoughts, why Nike, or as a matter of fact, Lululemon are winning much more than others when basically everyone is operating within the same industry. That to us, essentially, is the definition of becoming future ready. That's the ultimate payoff.
So let's give it a few seconds. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions, and we're gonna ask a few more questions throughout. I see here popping in here. Great. So let's have a look.
I bet there are also some Nike fan base out here. Is it possible statistically with 150 people that wouldn't be having some Nike fan base? I suspect some people may even have purchased NFT by Nike into their metaverse these days. Well, I think some of the key theme emerging from the discussion point is, well, they have the good branding, right? They social listen more carefully than others. Now, obviously, Nike is very, very strong on the digital front end.
That's right.
If you're looking at how they engender working with key opinion leaders around the world, which is pretty amazing. They know how to work with opinion leader who having their micro audience, right? In the past, you remember back in the 80s and 90s, how Nike sell their product is standard product, standard marketing, going through a national campaign. Endorse Michael Jordan, you win around the world. That period of time is gone. Of course, you still do the big brand, but you need to engage in social media, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, individual opinion leader who could bring that connection to your consumer. That's the new mode of marketing. So that's branding for one. But looking at that, Nuno also described about data-driven organization. I think this is really key, right? Because in today's world, whether you are a sneaker manufacturer, whether you are advertisement agents, whether you are a bank, if you're not digital savvy, you don't have the operating right to win in the marketplace. So obviously, they have a lot of data analytics, which allow essentially the organization to also enable consumer to personalize.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, if I'm reading all the comments right, I see lots of comments actually around fast adaptation, which of course is driven by data on the consumer's behavior, data-driven organizations adjusting and personalizing products, lots and lots of relevant products and services. But I think there's also a couple of comments that are really interesting, that it is not only about understanding the customer, but how we deliver that to the customer.
That's right. Because in a way, if you think about Nike, they allowed you to personalize your sneakers, customize it to different material and design. They ship it to you within weeks around the world at scale, at a high margin. Doing that required the whole idea of global digital supply chain, right? Because we know Nike do not actually manufacture their shoes. They orchestrate this network of factory, all spanning from Bangladesh all the way to Vietnam. It would be impossible and crazy for Nike to essentially integrate all this order on a manual basis. The digital supply chain must be world-class so that they predict what is trending. They would eliminate inventory through targeted markdown, moving required model from one warehouse to another to capture opportunity. If you think about these, this is not unique to Nike. This is ubiquitous, whether it's Amazon or Walmart. They do this all the time. But what it illustrates is future-ready organization, even when you're making a consumer brand, is not just about the front end. It's also about your back-end plumbing. A lot of the time, Mark and I listen to executives, they will say, we want our organization to be more agile. And Nike is definitely a very, very agile organization, as we can see there. But their agility is prime because their backend is so clean. If Nike needs to use email coordination with the supplier, or worse, some company told me in global logistics, sometimes fax machines still exist.
Still exist, exactly.
That will never work. What is required is extreme simplification on the operation so that your marketing manager, your sales can be extremely agile in the front end. It goes beyond mindset. It requires certain capability building in-house so that your front end can be fast, your back end can be clean and operating at scale. That, to me, defines a winning formula of both Lululemon and Nike as a result.
Right, exactly. And Howard, this reminds me again, as if you just imagine a situation where if you were to be a Nike or a Lululemon and you get all of these digital touch points, you have a digitized supply chain. Can you imagine that people would send emails and Excel files and go to check here, call somebody, where can I find this file? Where is it on my SharePoint? You cannot imagine this, right? No. And here I think one of the really interesting concepts that we find again and again coming back that allows a company like Nike, but also other companies actually to simplify and actually to reduce the complexity in their organization, whether it is all the way to marketing up to until supply chain, warehousing, the whole value chain.
Wait, but Mark, you're not talking about SAP and EDS. No. I mean, data exchange has been around forever.
That's right.
I mean, there's nothing new. But unless there is some kind of a way to deploy this data exchange at scale, but at low cost, it's very hard to do.
Right.
I don't think anyone wants to suffer through another SAP implementation. It would be impossible.
That's right. And I think this is, we want to avoid that we see what we would like to call the big mud, right? So the big mud is this huge collection of complicated systems that we're going to make more complex because we're trying to integrate everything. So if we want to avoid that, I think what we see in some of the organizations is a very interesting use of a particular technology or technology set that allows the company to become a little bit more simple, a bit less complex, and keep the agility and responsiveness from the supply chain all the way to personalization of the customer.
Wait, sounds like magic. So how do you do that?
It's not much magic around there. It is a very simple concept. I think that we can call it, let's call it an API for the moment, which is currently the leading technology that allows us to simplify complex organizations through basically a piece of software. And as you know, I always like to make things simple, and it has something to do with food.
Oh,
So it has to be, especially when you're in China, you have to talk about food, right? So the API is, I think, a really interesting and important concept that refers to an application programming interface. And it is exactly that. It's an interface. And as you can see here, imagine that you're in a restaurant and you're thinking about ordering food. You're in the restaurant, you order a very interesting special dish. It could be a Japanese special, delicious food, Malaysian food, French food. But I do not know how to cook. I do not even know how to explain how to make the food. So what do I do in a restaurant? Well, I talk to a waiter, and the waiter goes to talk to the kitchen and make sure that the person in the kitchen and the team in the kitchen knows what to do, which tools to use, how hot the oven should be, whether or not the fridge is full. I don't need to know that, and I cannot know that. The API is basically the waiter in your organization to a little piece of software that allows you to connect whether or not you understand what is at the other end, to use that interface. Now, I know that food and waiters is not maybe all of our business, but think about it. Something like an API that allows me, in the context of a bank, for instance, to do automatic fraud detection, or thinking about payment gateways. I do not need to know the details of how to run that, but an API is basically a little interface that allows me to use it without actually knowing how that works. So an API, and we see companies like Nike, but also, as we will see, other companies are actually very good at building and leveraging platforms, digital exchange platforms that are driven by these APIs that allow them, in fact, to become much more modular than a typical complex organization otherwise would be.
So you are saying, in a traditional way, if you're thinking about complex bank, a state-owned bank, for instance, usually when you do fraud detection, it's a very complex procedures, and you're sending all this know your customer information to the headquarters, and they check everything.
Right.
You cannot decouple these processes.
That's
and
right.
What you described is I can take a very large, big processes, chunk it out to smaller pieces, you could call microservice maybe, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is exactly what is happening. And you imagine it, it's a big box, complicated with all kinds of interconnected processes. What actually microservices do is say, let's focus on what are the key business capabilities and unpack those and make these independent microservices that I can call on. And I do not need to know the details. I do not need to know exactly how all of these things work. I only need to know, what do I need to achieve? What is the capability I would like to call on? And this actually allows us to unpack this monolithic, very heavy, complicated structure into a bunch of microservices that then me, you, everybody actually can use and call on. And, we all like to watch movies, right?
Yeah.
This is exactly what Netflix does.
Wow.
So if you look at it, for instance, somebody at Netflix works and is building a new tool or a new cool functionality, and then maybe I'm working on this new idea. I would like to input. I would like to know what is the recommended movies for one of my watchers. I do not know how to find it, where to find it. I'm not a programmer, but I can use a little microservice, find this, access it, and use it in my new idea, my new project, and new experiment. So it allows me to use business capabilities instantly through an API that we call a microservice. And companies like Nike are actually very good at building these. And in many ways, they're very good at building these in an open way.
Yes, yes. So there are a couple of observations from the audience, which is really interesting.
Absolutely.
So Janus basically described how API and platform helps company to, outsource the non-essential activities real time without being noticed by customer. I think it's right, because one of the major benefit for API and open platform is everyone can mind their own business.
That's right.
And people can collaborate with one another without engendering a lot of complexity. You think about in a world without API, my God, if I want to share information with you,
Right.
I need to build dedicated data pipeline to you. We need to sign all this crazy legal document because I need to make sure whatever information passing on to you, it won't get messed up and so on. Well, API, just like you described now, I realized like a waiter to hide away complexity.
Exactly.
You know, you think about Facebook, right? People would run an ad on Facebook. You never call up a Facebook customer representative to run an ad. You go into that platform, you spell out your requirement, and everything interface is standardized through API so that it gets shown on Facebook's social media platform or others at space as well. That to me is the simplification element as well.
Exactly.
But Christos asked a very interesting question down there. And how do you ensure the end-to-end ownership and functionality that you don't keep on splitting to many parts and becoming confusing?
This is an excellent question. And you know, the answer is in a way very simple. Not every business capability needs to be cut open and cut down to the smallest possible microservice. In fact, many organizations have a handful or a number of hundreds of microservices that are critical to actually develop and run the key processes. And this actually is the best way to start it. If we cut it up into two small pieces, then we basically end up with the same problem as that we had with the monolith, right? That we have not a big mud in one clunk, but we have a lot of mess all over the wall, right? So the detail and the devil is in the detail here is what should be the right level of microservice? What is the type of business capability that benefits from being an independent piece of capability that others can use? And obviously this means that it has to be a capability, a microservice that is used by lots and lots of people, lots of employees, leaders in the organization to make a difference. So I think it's a great point, and it also reminds us that we should not, the end goal is not to make as many microservices as possible, but to make sure that the microservices serve our business capabilities and our needs.
And it goes to Jerome's question that, how much we should standardize to facilitate that, inter-exchange across different parties. I think it depending on the ambition of the organization. There are organizations decided this is basically, we want to be a global company and we want to serve a long tail of customer. If that's the case, we better make sure it's as standard as possible, as easily adoptable. It in large part depending on the industry dynamic as well. These days, you're going to see, and we're going to see, a lot of example. It doesn't need to be just on movie streaming like Netflix, nor the early example we had. But whether it's finance all the way to others, it's the same. But I just want to call out, I know API and microservice is sometimes for some people maybe a little bit of a more technical term, but it is also a very, very fascinating discussion as well. Because in many ways, you could either monetize it, or you could also doing it in a way to help your organization to become very, very simple. So Mark and I have actually wrote an article on MIT Sloan. So if you would like to get access to that article because it has a paywall, send an email to our colleague Diego. Diego is going to put down his email address in the chat box right now so that you could ask him to forward you the article that describe how microservice as well as API can keep your organization simple, to unleash innovation and to reduce coordination cost. Now, this is not a magic bullet.
Right.
You still need to think about the strategy in the area where you want to leverage API.
Right.
But the good news is you do not need to boil the ocean. Today is unlike back in the 90s. When you implement certain IT capability, you do not need to boil the ocean. You don't need a multi-billion-dollar budget. You could start with the low-hanging fruit to generate that momentum towards simplification. And I think this is key. This is absolutely key.
It is key. And I think the real insight is, it's a tool that is available, that is actually pretty widely available today, that we can leverage to lower the complexity in our organizations. It may not work everywhere, but it might work in selected experiments, parts of the organization. And that's really, really possible to know. So, we invite you also to read an article on this topic. and see where the potential might be also for your organizations.
But going back to Jerome's question, how do I ensure if I'm a global company, how do I ensure that it would become a global standard in a way? And in that world, nothing beats the example of financial institution. Because in many ways, money is money. Money moves around the world. Now, people talk about a lot of geopolitics and things like that, and that is fair and just, like semiconductor, like the technology war, the AI arm race. And before I came to Shenzhen, I was in Hong Kong, and I noticed even in Hong Kong, TikTok is no longer available. It's only Douyin.
Yep.
And ChatGPT is in full rage around the world, but in Hong Kong, it just got blocked a few days ago.
Right.
So the idea that we are moving into a split net,
Yeah, exactly.
into a multi-bipolar world is real, is here.
Right.
But then money is money. Whether it's Chinese tourists traveling to Europe or European traveling to China, we do need to make payment. I need to buy lunch.
Exactly.
So money is money. It will still move around the world as long as we have human need.
Right.
So in a way, if we ask if there is a need for companies or organization to establish a global standard, to my mind is the world of finance.
Right.
And if you think about Visa card and Mastercard, one of our research at IMD is we basically benchmark which organization are most future ready. And we measure revenue growth, profit growth, but also new type of innovation. We'll show you the link so that you could look at later on to looking at some of the interactive chart of the future readiness indicator in the world of finance as well. But over the years, again and again, company that top our list is Mastercard and Visa. Now, you may say, oh, Howard, this is not fair. These are payment company. Of course, bank cannot be as good. But then you have American Express. Once upon a time, they were king of credit card, but today they rank bottom of our list.
Exactly.
As measured by objective measurements such as revenue growth, profit growth, new innovation result, ESG, etc. So then the key question is, how did Mastercard and Visa card to be so good for so long? Because for the longest time, we think the credit card is going to disappear. That plastic card we hold in our hand is going to disappear, but they did not. Turns out what Visa and Mastercard have done is they embrace the idea of frenemies using API. Let me explain. These days, whether you are Apple Pay, whether you're Google Wallet, whether you're PayPal, underneath, when you use those payment transactions, is actually cleared by Mastercard and Visa card network.
That's right.
No matter what you use, whether you're buying even cryptocurrency, sometimes it's also transact and clear by Visa card and Mastercard network. So how do they do that? It's exactly using very secure but open API, so that whether you are as frenetic like Apple, I want complete security for my client, you need to opt in Visa and Master. If you are, Coinbase, once upon a time is still a startup. Now, of course, it's one of the big, gigantic crypto exchange. You also use Visa or Mastercard network to clear those payments. What this illustrates is for a big company, it would forever be too slow, and it would forever be too hard to chase after the next wave of disruption. And what Visa and Master have realized, if we cannot beat them, we let them join us. But the constraint is the following. If Mastercard needs to sign up new fintech one by one, it would be forever. They would never win. The reality is Mastercard need to partner with Grab in Singapore. At the same time, they need to work with Revolut in London.
Right.
And they need to secure giant like Google Wallet and Apple Pay. If you think about the long tail of customer, this is crazy. Can you imagine? Every company we speak of, they always say we need to focus to serve our core market. Visa and Mastercard do not care. Whatever bank you are around the world, from Saudi Arabia, all the way to China, all the way to Switzerland and United States, they serve everyone. Whether you're state-owned bank, gigantic one, or all the way to tiny little startup, Revolut, once upon a time, no one cares. They could partner with them. How? API. What that illustrates, interestingly here, is that if you make that API to be secure, of course, what we see is Facebook API wasn't that secure.
Right.
And as a result, they lose their reputation. As a result, I think these days, when they try to go into crypto, they fail because central banks do not trust them.
Right.
So reputation is a license to operate for sure. Not that Facebook doesn't know how to do it, but they lose the public trust central bank to allow them. Now, Master and Visa card is very different. Mm-hmm. From day one, they do not try to sell people's ad.
Exactly.
Their business model is to operate and help moving money around. And from that angle, Adopt and plus the API platform, they were allowing them to scale the long tail. And going back to one of the questions, how come Matter is less successful? I think it goes back to the domain knowledge. When you're operating in the world of finance, there's so much regulation that actually you need a lot of industry expertise. Right. Know your customer is one, anti-money laundering is one, fraud detection is another one, just to give 3 examples. This is the core knowledge and capability that Mastercard and Visa card have been building on over the years. And when you leverage them plus API, make those internal capability, fraud detection, know your customer to be available to third party. That's the power of open collaboration. So I guess in the world of finance, it's one of these rare examples in the world, it becomes more and more polarized. Right. Money is still moving around the world. Exactly.
And what I'm hearing, Howard, which I think is fascinating, is that even though we see all these new technologies, digital technologies, APIs, but actually it's still very, very important to be good at what you did and what you do. That's the core competence in the sense of understanding the environment, the regulatory environment, the capabilities in this case in finance is still as relevant and probably even more relevant as it was, because it feels like picking up on this long tail of customers using APIs, open APIs, all kinds of very new and cool technologies. It also depends on them being able to set the standard.
That's right. So I think what ultimately transpires is when company facing disruption, we tend to think, oh my God, everything we know is useless. It's almost like, the classic saying, photo is going digital. So whatever Kodak knows is irrelevant. Well, that is one case, but that would be a complete generalized to an unrealistic extreme. What turns out to be the case is organization needs to reinvent themselves, but they should always think about how do you repackage your domain knowledge to partner with others. That's the magic. It's almost like whatever capability that you're so good at, we've got to think about a way to externalize it. Is this new? No. Amazon, right?
Exactly.
Amazon, they're great in running servers because they're a huge e-commerce operation. And guess what? They externalize it into Amazon Web Services, cloud computing services. This, I think, is the breakthrough. That we should not always think about, you are my enemy and we won't collaborate. Sometimes it's frenemies. Don't think about your operation, whether it's logistic, whether it's supply chain, maybe manufacturing. Selectively, if you open up, whoa, magic can happen.
Exactly. So we're now actually going into a world where it means being future ready and future proofing the organization still needs to rely on lots of domain knowledge, but it also is to what extent are you enabling others, maybe including your competitors, to grow? And I think that's a really, really important aspect of becoming more and more future ready.
That's right.
Where obviously being very well prepared, like the Mastercards, the Nikes of the world that are very good at reducing complexity inside the organization so that they become very attractive to become a partner for other organizations. And I think that's a really powerful concept to keep in mind. I think we might have another example or not.
I know, because these days, like whenever I speak to executive, talking about a company example of, Mastercard or Visa, this is all fine. I mean, we could see the analogy into legal work, to training for human resources domain, but these are more like services.
That's right.
And at IMD, we have a lot of clients making hardware. Not exactly semiconductor, although we have one client from your hometown in Holland, ASML. But a lot of our clients are making heavy machineries, electronic gadget, consumer electronics. Mark, Tell me an example of how API and this logic of collaboration can be applied to a company making real stuff. I want real stuff I can touch and play.
Real stuff, real stuff.
Yes.
So let's fly to China for that one.
For China, yes. Now we're in China. That's right.
I think, we need to cover, winning in the future means winning in the whole world, right?
That's right.
We cannot only focus on one part of the world. And there's an interesting company and an interesting story around a company called Xiaomi. And put here on the slide, you can see all the kinds of products that this company makes. And it's definitely
so many. This is outrageous. Wait, are you telling me Xiaomi is making electric scooters all the way to headset, VR headset, and then wait, this T-shirt there?
Exactly.
Smart wearable. Wait, they make all these?
And this is the thing. So they produce all of these products, but they actually make very, very few of these themselves. In fact, the number of products is stunning. It's over 300 different types of products. Indeed, anything that is smart and electronics in your house, you will find a Xiaomi product, and a Xiaomi product of a good quality.
I don't get it. This is impossible. You basically talking about a company can enter different vertical, serving different types of customers, but having a similar touch and feel and then show quality.
Right.
I mean, if that's the case, then we would see a lot more companies like this. But how does that happen?
So you might imagine that this company must have a massive R&D facility.
Don't they?
Right. Well, they don't.
What?
In fact, they don't have a massive R&D capability. Now, then you may think,
I don't believe it.
Yeah, maybe they have just a lot of money, right?
Yes.
They just buy all of this. And it is true that they have a lot of partners that co-invest with them in interesting products. But this is all not the most interesting part of the company. Actually, the most interesting part of the company is that in the end, they still build and circle around a fantastic digital exchange platform that again enables others to grow in a similar fashion as Mastercard or what we see with other organizations. So what does this mean? Is actually Xiaomi's original product is a piece of software, is an IoT solution, which is actually not even developed by themselves. It's developed from the beginning by their fans, the users, the customers of the company. They launched this, they build this every week, a new update. Everybody was happy to be part of that development, totally co-created. And the company find out that using this, they can build all kinds of products. But instead of building them themselves, they went out and said, what about we find really interesting ventures, companies, entrepreneurs that we invest in, that we partner with. And rather than us building that all of us ourselves, no, we focus on that one digital layer, the digital exchange platform that can connect all of these products to our core system and our mobile phones.
So wait, so they started off basically building sort of an Android skin for people's mobile phone.
That's right.
Which they don't even have a mobile phone yet.
Exactly.
And then because you have this fan base keep on creating, they use that as the glue everywhere.
Exactly. So they focus and they have been focusing on, making it very, very easy for companies to connect to them, to partner with, to play with. So they have amazing investments in, for instance, building standardized software development packages. They have built the standards on how to use their devices, all kinds of modules, applications. Actually, it's become so easy for developers, other organizations and companies to work with them that it is almost no need for them to build everything themselves because they want to be they are the glue in that ecosystem that they have been creating. And of course, in that system, one of the core elements is again the open APIs and the many microservices. And you know what's really interesting? What you would imagine a company, 300 different products, over 2,500 SKUs. And it's a big business. It's a $50 billion business, 50% inside China, 50% of their sales outside of China, still growing, even during COVID, 20% year on year. And you would imagine that this whole organization becomes a massive 300 product group business. No, the company actually is still very, very small. They don't even take majority stakes in the companies that they work with. Because they say, they're good at what they're doing. we're good at building this software layer. We're building the glue. As long as we keep doing this, we do not need to control what the others are doing. Let them do what they do well, and we enable them to grow together with us. And that, I think, is a very powerful story.
Yeah. So I think this is really interesting, right? In a way that currently company may use API as a platform to do data exchange. But I remember having a discussion with the CTO from Mastercard 2 weeks ago, and he described, well, because of a lot of security concern, 5G is coming. API may not be the right mechanics in 2 years. What may be required is the real-time data streaming. But what is interesting is the change of logic from a market competition into ubiquitous collaboration is the key. It's almost like today is using API as a vehicle for company to become platform right away. In the future, may not be API anymore, but maybe something else. But that shift of logic is actually quite hard to do, I would imagine.
I think the executives that we work with at IMD, they recognize the value of some of these concepts, but they also see there's all kinds of challenges. And this is a very different way of working. This is a very different way of thinking. How do we work with partners? What do we do ourselves? What do we let work through others? How do we enable an ecosystem is actually not a very easy business challenge.
And I think ultimately what we see is things started from one side of the economy would over time diffuse over.
That's right.
I mean, this whole idea of leveraging API started off with only the technology sector, right? Historically, it's only Facebook of the world would even talk about that. Finance is not quite there. And then you start to see fintech embracing that. Then later on, even state-owned bank or traditional bank, DBS, Ping An, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, beginning to embrace. And then we start to see even car companies, these things. Can you imagine, like when I visited Munich and Stuttgart, they are talking about that. 5 years ago, no one would talk about that.
That's it.
So it's always the diffusion from one side of the coin to another that makes the world very interesting. I'm just going to pop one link for those who are curious about our future readiness indicator. You could click on this. This is our latest ranking for the financial industry. We would have an update by May. So in less than 4 weeks' time, on the news, you will see our latest ranking across different financial company on which one is the most future ready. But looking at the names of companies or participants coming in, some of you are also in fashion, some of you are in automotive, and some of you are actually from pharmaceutical as well. For each of these sectors, we also produce proprietary ranking for each of these sectors as well. What we try to do is to have a broad sweep of what are some of the future-ready principles across different industries, because there's so much for us to learn from one another. Each industry would have specific insight. However, these insights are oftentimes translatable across as well. Again, whenever you want to know more about some of these research methods, if some of these ranking you want to dig down deeper, send an email to Diego as well, because oftentimes, whether it's bank or whether it's a manufacturer, they want to have a quick chat. Hey, how do you rank these? Could we also take part of the story and part of the ranking just to benchmark a little bit? This is all possible. Just send an email to Diego and we'll make sure we connect you with the right resources, either from my center or from Mark as well, to make it happen for you guys.
Right, exactly. And I think here the key point is really to see different practices in different industries and what can we learn from the different industries and different practices. And for this, we have to look around the world. We have to not only look at our own industry, look at other industries, but also in markets where we are more or less familiar. Yeah. So very, I see an interesting question from that here, right?
Yes. So talking about, do we measure also more like learning digital ecosystem? Yes. And tell you what, we build a AI robot to analyze company personality exactly on your dimension. Whether this is a company very digitally oriented, whether this is an organization having a strong learning orientation, What is strong learning orientation? When something works in one part of the world, you transfer the knowledge elsewhere. You have a radical transparency across, so that all the evidence generated are shared not on need-to-know basis, but by default.
Okay.
And so we define a number of behavior that define learning orientation. And then we build this AI robot to basically look through 60 news sources across 10 years, from the BBC to CNBC to investors report, earning report, all the transcript. Of course, we all talk about ChatGPT these days.
Right.
And before ChatGPT, we've been building a robot to do things like this. And so check out our website and you will see exactly how we use the robot to illustrate why some companies are more excel in learning versus others in relation to total shareholders return. So we actually can quantify some of these behavior, right? We all know having psychological safety is good. But what we can now beginning to show, when you link with learning orientation, it actually ties with a strong correlation with total shareholders return. So the evidence continue to emerge and we are totally excited. But Mark, there is some element that we always heard from participants. It's like, this is all great, inspirational. Right. I love it.
Right.
But it's impossible from my firm.
My firm is different. We have lots of limitations. Where we would love to do some of this, but where do we start? And who starts with this, right? Is this something that just the CEO can start or initiate, or is this something where we can play a role? And in the work we've been doing, actually there's lots of ways to actually start with yourself and yes. Start with your team and within your department. And of course today, we didn't have a lot of time to go into the specifics of how to do that. And for instance, to think about how potentially you can build a roadmap, not for your whole organization, no. But actually for the team or the department that you're responsible for. And here we have some ideas, right, Howard?
Yeah, because in many, many ways, what you want to become is also a future-ready leader. Exactly. Because a company in the end is comprises of individual. You can think about this as a 3 concentric circle. Let's think about a future-ready company as the outer circle. Then you have a learning team. In the end, is a future-ready leader in the center, and everyone needs to play their own part. So Mark and I have this passion that we are more than happy to share with you the roadmap, how you could bring your team and your colleagues, people share your same mindset, to find the least path of resistance to build your future-ready roadmap. Is very exciting for me to think about future readiness, looking at future ready organization. But in the end, how do you make your next best step is the most passionate move for us. So if this is something that intrigues you, you want to know more about how you could build your own roadmap for your own team, or even for yourself, again, send an email to Diego. Diego, if you could reflag your email, that would be great. And people would ask for follow-up reading and resources, and we'll follow up with you for those who are ready to build their own roadmap as well.
Exactly. And keep in mind that the story about future readiness is not just about the technology or the API. And these are all enablers of, in fact, what makes a company more and more future ready. And today we've seen 3 companies. We've talked about Nike, we've talked about Mastercard, and we've talked about Xiaomi in different parts of the world. That have been very good at, in a way, saving themselves while saving others.
That's right.
And I think that's a very, very exciting development, which has to start with the individual leader, with yourselves. So we're looking forward to keep in touch with all of you. And again, thanks, Diego, for sharing here your email address. Very, very, very good.
That's right. So let's keep the conversation going. There is so much resources we would like to share with you more. Today, I didn't get a chance to nearly talk enough around how we measure future readiness. So I just put the link down there. It's a balanced scorecard. It cannot be just about earning. Of course not. For pharmaceutical, it's both earning as well as top line growth, pipeline of the drugs, R&D spending, also all kinds of new product development. So think about this as a balanced scorecard. Good governance structure, ESG these days is important, board diversity. So we try to have a composite score. And some of the most exciting findings, of course, it would correlate with share price performance in the next year as well. Because if you're future ready, there must be a correlation to your future performance, at least in the medium term. So let's keep the conversation going. Again, you have Diego, email address there. If there are a follow-up reading you want for a specific topic, go for it. Veronica asked for, is there any industry? So by May, we're going to include also food and beverage. Yes, great. In 1 month precisely, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and Nestle of the world will be ranked, alongside with an update of banking as well as automotive. And by December, we will do another update, but you already have pharmaceutical and other sectors as well. So check out our Future Readiness website and stay tuned. And Mark and I are both on LinkedIn. We love chatting with you. Exactly. And so please stay in touch.
Stay in touch with us and share your thoughts and join us on the journey to become future ready, yourself, your team, and your organization.
And we wish you all the best to become a future ready leader.
Exactly. Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.